Thank you for listening to Breakthrough Consciousness,
the podcast where we get out of the loop and into it all.
My name is Sean.
And I'm Clayton.
And as your co-hosts, we're going to be facilitating hearty conversation centered around personal growth.
Whether that be through us sharing our own stories and experiences, or holding space for our guests to share theirs, we're going to tie it all together with lively conversation and hope that you all enjoy.
All right. So today we are going to do something different. This is going to be a crossover episode between Breakthrough Consciousness and our sister channel, if you will, Resounding Source Guided Meditations. So this is a series that I've been planning for a while now, and it started as an idea to do a series of guided meditations based around emotional awareness, cultivating it, sitting within it, understanding it. But then I felt that perhaps those meditations would resonate with people a little bit more after hearing a dialogue, kind of contextualizing why it is even important or valuable to cultivate emotional awareness. So this is part one of a 4-part series. The first 2 parts are going to be Clayton and myself as Breakthrough Consciousness. This episode, we're talking about what emotion is to us, our personal understandings of it. We go into mental health. We go into the health of the planet, emotional survival, topics like that, painting the picture of why this is important. In part 2, we offer a method for working through negative emotions. So that is a tool that we can use in the battlefield, in the midst of being emotionally triggered. It can be used as a tool of reflection for after something has happened, just kind of processing it and working through that. So that's part 2. And then the second 2 parts are meditations, guided meditations. The first one, part 3, is a gentle kind of easing into the waters of emotion and simply sitting with what's there. And the final part is a more advanced meditation and visualization where we are intentionally going into those deep waters with the intention of extracting some wisdom and releasing some of the holds that negative emotional patterns, subconscious patterns have over our behaviors and over our lives.
Would you want to start off by giving your definition of emotion and what it is to you?
Yeah, let's just kick it off here. So my initial sense of what emotion was defined as in my life, like until the past couple weeks, I just thought emotion was feeling, any feelings, good feelings, bad feelings, just thought that was all considered emotion. But then I stumbled across a YouTube video from Suzanne Michelle Fox from revivewithtenergy.com, which really redefined my understanding of emotion. She was talking about how emotion is not just raw feeling. That's what she would call intuition. But it has this mental component to it as well. There's a story that we are correlating with that feeling.
I really like that. The idea of the stories that we attach to things and what kind of gives life to a feeling, essentially what you're saying, making it into emotion.
Right, because without that mental component to it, without those thoughts and analysis and perhaps judgment associated with a feeling in a given scenario, circumstance, whatever, without that, it's just pure energy, right? It's just a feeling.
Is what it is. Transient almost, comes and goes, and until we actually attach our own
labels,
perspective and label to it, it is nothing other than an intuition, a feeling that we aren't going to understand until we shed some light onto that situation.
Exactly. So we'll kind of break down both of our definitions here as we go through the episode, but just to kind of lay them out first, you want to go ahead and give yours?
Yeah, and I like how you brought up what your past idea of what emotion is, because it made me think just now, like, what did I ever really consider my emotions before I feel that I had a somewhat of an actual understanding, a better grasp on what it is without having to reach for it, you know?
Right, because it is always evolving, you know? We're always getting a clearer understanding of our life.
Truly. And for the longest time, I would almost say I had really no clue what my own emotions were. If anything, they were somewhat of a nuisance, I would say, before I was taking the energy to actually become aware of these feelings that I was going through. They were just intuitions and feelings that I was ignoring, not paying attention to how it's making me feel, which direction it's pulling me, is this making me better, worse, whatever. But
almost something to be like in control of or above.
It's like, yep, all right, well, I'm feeling this way. Well, I'm going to feel this way. I'm going to do this. And, you know, but over the last 3, 4, 5+ years, I don't know how much time it's been since I've actually decided to, you know, sit with myself and kind of take the time to understand what these feelings are and attach those stories to them and make them become emotions. So for me now, and at this point, emotion is kind of like a message or a guidepost towards what I'm actually feeling internally at my core, so that I can actually work on it for better or for worse. For me, like, it's taking those raw feelings and energy and intuition, like you were saying, and being like, oh, I'm kind of hurting right now. What is the root of this? And, you know, sitting with that part of myself and feeling that, okay, this situation isn't conducive to who I am, how I feel. It's not helping me to be better. It's kind of dragging me down. So taking my own awareness and shining it on that feeling emotionally, oh man, I'm sad. What can I do to make this situation better? I might be attached to, oh, you know, a friend and I aren't getting along right now, so I'm going to put some extra energy into, I can tell that's why I'm not feeling great. So emotionally, oh, I'm sad, so I'm going to take some extra energy into making that right, because I had that guidepost that pointed me into the direction of, this isn't good, move that way, you know, figure it out, it's right here, take, not control, but allow it to be what it is and move forward in a sense that allows us to move beyond that feeling and to grow with our emotions.
To grow and also to be more in alignment
with our true selves.
Yeah.
Like I was saying, to come more into the core, the heart center of what our self really is.
And it's just to like live in that harmony and like the equilibrium. I feel like that's what emotions are. They're
emotions
like these...
are very wavy.
Yeah.
And as we've talked about, just in conversation between ourselves, emotion being energy in motion. It is this full wavelength, this full spectrum of what it is we're feeling and experiencing, and taking that awareness and being like, okay, so this is what it is. And to me, maybe it's not as much included for a lot of other people's definition of what emotion is, but for me, it is fully included that with, oh, this is how I'm feeling, it's immediately a finger pointing towards how I can feel better. Or if I'm already feeling great, it's a finger pointing right towards the center of myself, like, you're here, keep it up and keep that momentum and energy going.
Exactly. Absolutely. So I guess
to make a long description even longer, but to simplify it a little bit, to me, emotion is just the analytical, mental understanding of what our feelings are.
And what they're pointing towards.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Cool. Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. So now let's kind of talk about, just to break it down a little bit more, I feel like right now what we're getting at is this conscious component, the thoughts around these feelings, which we're calling emotion. Thought and feeling equals motion.
Yeah,
so that's,
taking the two.
So that's like this conscious understanding of what emotion is and what they're pointing towards as like signals for staying in equilibrium, like a kind of like the check engine light on a dashboard of a car. You know, it's this symbol telling us that we need to look a little bit deeper into the situation, we need to pop the hood and see what's going on. Yeah. Not just figure out how to turn that signal off, but actually figure out what it's trying to tell us.
Yeah, to get to the root, the core of the situation, tune it up, turn it off, plug it back in, whatever it takes. And
exactly. So now that we've kind of given an idea of what emotion's relationship is to thought, in the sense that feelings plus thought equals emotion in this definition that we're working with here. Let's now bridge that to the physical component. So we've got the mental component. Now, where does the physical relate to emotion? Because it is very intertwined, don't you feel?
Most definitely. I would even go so far to skip a stone across to the other side of the river and saying that it's more about the subconscious, and the body is a lot of where these feelings are going to stem from. To me, the subconscious very closely intertwining, almost synonymous with the body, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
So,
in the sense that, if I can interrupt, I feel like to drive home why they are so interrelated, I feel that the subconscious mind, and we'll go into subconsciousness in much more depth in like an episode for that in and of itself. But for anyone that doesn't already have a relationship with that word, I would say that the subconsciousness is like our personal conditionings. So it's these belief systems that we've acquired from our earliest experiences as humans that have kind of set up our personality and our beliefs and our relationship to the things that happen in life.
Truly, and it goes so far as to how we hold stress or traumas and experiences in our own physical body within the muscles.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of times, as a massage therapist, experiencing, how someone might shy away to a touch, working, around the thigh or whatever, if they've had just sexual trauma or something and they've held that there, they've been abused or whatever.
Even if it wasn't traumas, it might just be a mental belief system that they're like, oh no, you can't touch that because that's taboo. You know what I mean?
Right. Assuring the space to allow people to let go of physical holds, attachments, knots in their body, and to prove that emotional release and to bring those feelings to the surface and release in the body is where I see kind of how emotion sleeps within our subconscious vessel of the body. Mm-hmm. Whereas, people always hear, we carry the weight of the world on our shoulders, or, you know what I mean? The world, Earth's breaking my back today,
Right.
We're all stressed, holding our shoulders up tight, taking all this crazy mental faculties and energy and just holding ourselves so tense and tight.
Yeah. And those cliches are pointing to the truth of the matter, that is, we do hold emotion in our muscles.
Mm-hmm. The interrelation
right.
of the body, the mind, and even so far to go as the spirit of ourselves, and
mm-hmm.
the core and the center of how we operate and how everything is what it is.
Exactly. So the point of the matter is that the body and the subconscious mind are very interrelated. So our subconsciousness holds beliefs about how we expect reality to unfold based on what we've experienced in our earliest years. So, for instance, if someone speaks to us with a kind of scolding tone, like, regardless of what they're saying, our subconsciousness might read that emotion as a threat. If we
immediately throwing up barriers.
Right. They might be saying something that they might be saying, yoga is good for your health. You know what I mean? But you're not hearing that truth of their language. You're hearing the energy of the emotion that they're saying in their tone, which is, a subconscious recollection, a subconscious
projection.
Yeah, all of the above.
Mm-hmm.
So my point here is that subconscious information, the very definition of subconscious is that it's below our conscious mind. We might not necessarily be aware of it in our thoughts and in our mind until we become aware of it consciously, until we put in that work. It's only going to be a sub-understanding, a sub-awareness of that energy.
Truly, and taking it back to the idea and process of shining our own awareness onto a feeling, to derive that understanding, and to relate it to emotion. It's like the subconscious, below the consciousness, is producing these feelings unconsciously, mm-hmm. without our own awareness. We're not, thinking, okay, I'm going to feel this way. I'm going to, tense up my muscles and tighten up my back and cause myself to hurt and stress out. It's not that at all.
It's an instinctual response.
It's an instinctual response, exactly. And it's a very subconscious process that we do ourselves. And to an extent, it is the matter of keeping homeostasis. Okay, we got to keep moving, we got to keep working, so I'm just going to hold it all back here and keep my stuff together until I freak out. Hopefully not.
No,
really.
but that's so true, and that has like a survival function, in our evolution. We have this fight or flight response, so if we're out in the field, out in the jungle, wherever, as a hunter-gatherer type of human, okay, so we're gathering some berries or something, let's say that, and then we hear a noise. Yeah, immediately our nervous system is spiked. We're either gonna fight or we're gonna flee, and we still have that mechanism in our bodies, in our brains, and in our beings.
In our beans.
So, now we're being triggered by things that aren't actual fatal threats, but our physiology is still responding as if they are. So, what's an example of this? Maybe you work in an office and your boss says something offensive and you can't fight them because they're your boss, So you might flee to your cubicle, but you feel defeated and hurt. And so your emotions have fled the situation, and now they want to cope. They want to soothe. So maybe you turn to coffee or a candy bar or something like that is gonna elicit this dopamine burst in your brain. Say it was even an apple, take it to the natural environment. You eat an apple, there's an emotion there's a feeling and an emotion that are correlated with eating an apple, because the sugars and fructose and whatever chemicals are in this apple, your body evolved to take that signal and say, this is good. This is something I need to survive. It has energy in it.
But then in turn, it seems like we're creating a coping mechanism to, almost suppress, not full on deal with the feelings that we're experiencing, or bring them to the surface and to create positive emotion out of the situation. We're all right, I don't feel good. I can make myself feel better by eating this apple, making myself release dopamine, maybe not treating myself as good as I can. Subconsciously, we're going to start holding on to all that, literally, or gaining weight, not being as healthy because of certain coping mechanisms.
Right. And to be clear here, if you're eating an apple as your coping mechanism, you're actually doing just fine.
You're doing better, but at the same time, it is still coping mechanism,
Yeah, I brought up the apple to kind of drive that point home as to why we have this chemical relationship to eating, that dopamine burst of sugars and fats, because evolutionary speaking, those are the things that are harder to find in the natural environment, and they're what fuel us most efficiently. Fats are the fuel for your brain, sugar is the carbohydrate energy for just sustaining the body's
bodily
energy
processes.
Yeah, exactly. So now that we're not in the woods, we're not picking berries that are hard to come by. Our hunting and gathering happens by deciding which restaurant to go to, or gathering supplies at the supermarket. All of that is readily available for us. So we find ourselves in the situation where if we aren't really tuned into our emotional well-being and needs, we might find ourselves in behavioral patterns that aren't really conducive to our own health. And I'm just using this, eating candy to soothe yourself as an example. It's something I've done before, so I'm sure it's relatable, But this is just one example. It could be anything, It could be hardcore addiction to, chemicals or substances or anything. It could be a behavior. It could be checking Facebook nonstop.
Literally, it's immediately got me thinking of my own, emotions, how I handle and process them, or how I even choose to cope with them unhealthily or not. I personally deal with a good bit of anger at times, and not something that comes out in public too often, or even with the people closest to me that often, but it will come out at times. A lot of times, mostly with myself.
Yeah.
And then other times it will leak onto, some of my best friends.
Right.
Not intentionally, but
Of course.
because, they are a lot closer. It's easier for me to be like, yo, darn you. And you know what I mean? Shame that. And then
No,
I'm like,
for sure.
even when at times there could have been a rational explanation towards, yeah, I'm allowed to feel that way, but I don't really want to take that out, so it'll turn to coping, me using cannabis to, I wouldn't want to say subdue or submit to any part of myself, but
as a bypass,
yeah, not being like, oh, I'm frustrated, I'm upset, I don't want to be angry. What do I do? Should I go talk to him, tell him how I feel? No, I mean, half the time, I know for a fact that'll cause an argument. Most people don't want to be confronted rawly with their emotions, their feelings, or even bring those to the surface. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to roll up a joint and take a few good puffs of it and let all of that go. And I'm not saying that's any healthier or unhealthier than eating a chocolate bar or an apple. It's still a coping mechanism, but it's stemming from an emotional awareness to my own subconscious reactions. It's fueling my body with the chemicals and feelings and activating the receptors within myself that are going to an extent, induce some happiness.
Right.
And allow me a step back from feeling that forefront emotion of anger on the surface, and to be able to look at it and be like, I'm not so mad. Like, I'll text him here in a little bit.
Right. And you know what? It's all about intention, which I'll get into in a minute. But before I say that, this could be whatever the example is in your personal life. I mean, I'm sure we all have a whole laundry list of automatic responses, what you might call bad habits or something. But the point is, no matter what it is, it's all an attempt to redirect the energy. You could say an attempt to distract yourself from the unpleasant feelings of the emotions, which, like we're talking about earlier, those emotions are actually trying to point us towards a greater and deeper equilibrium with our environment. And like you said before about, lashing out on close friends or family members, I just wanted to remark on that because that's so easy. I feel that people do that all the time because we lash out on the people that we know we're not going to kill the relationship by doing that. We can't lash out at our boss at work, right? But we might go home and yell at our wife or kids or, mom or dad or whatever it may be, or grandma and grandpa, because we know that they're not going to disown us because of some ugliness that we show them. So I just wanted to remark that that's a very common thing.
It is. And another point with bringing that up is because it is something to be fully worked through. It's something to see and be aware of and see that, a lot of us do act like that. Just based on a conversation I had last night with a bunch of good friends. It's such a common theme that it goes both ways. We're able to let go and be more open and share those beautiful parts of ourselves just as much as we're able to share what would be considered heavier or darker parts of self. Not in a negative sense, but just it's definitely not the most optimal parts of ourselves that we're always trying to put forward into the public. And
they're literally denser, negative emotions
as those
are
layers
heavier.
Are shed and shed and shed, we get to the core of ourself where you can't hide those denser emotions anymore. And you were saying, we're not going to totally jump out at our boss or, what I mean, say how we truly feel or get upset and fired up. But
if it's a threat to our lifestyle, if we feel like we're going to get fired or ruin a relationship or something like that, you're not going to take that risk.
But at the same time, I feel like a lot of what I'm getting at with this is that we have a lot of available means to work with our own feelings and to analyze our emotions in a healthier way. And there are a lot of different ways to do that. Everyone's going to do it differently.
Absolutely.
But what I'm saying is, maybe we can talk to our boss and maybe we can talk to our lover or our brother, our sister, cousin, whoever it is, in a lot sweeter, more communicative way when we're actually able to come into the roots of our emotions, find out those feelings, figure out what they are, and build a true response, seeing that, it's all stemming from within our own selves.
Absolutely. And it requires that conversation with yourself first and foremost. And that's what I wanted to get at when I said that it's all about intention. So you're speaking of how, we can do things differently. If let's keep going with this example of your boss says something that offended you and whatever, you could ignore it, suppress it, or you could find a way to confront them. But in order to do that in a way that's healthy, you have to confront yourself. You have to confront, why am I feeling like this? Why did that rub me the wrong way? Did I feel like it was unjust? Or was it just an ego thing? Did it just bring my ego, And if so, is it worth the conversation, or can I just heal that within myself? And that's why I wanted to talk about intention. You could use something like a candy bar, apple, or cannabis in a healthy way if you put that positive intention into it. If you say, hey, I'm something put me into a dense emotional state, I'm going to have a practice of having a mindful snack, and I'm going to eat this apple, or if it's a Twinkie or whatever it may be, I'm going to take each bite and totally feel it, and I'm going to make it a meditative practice. And then after that, my body is now a little bit calmer, probably a lot calmer.
Yeah, for
And then
sure.
we can kind of analyze that, what just happened in us.
And you fueled it with gratitude and intention.
Exactly.
And you're really experiencing the process of, I'm making myself feel better. I'm going to shift these emotions around. And in turn, we're going to have a lot clearer mind, a lot more centered perspective on how we can even move forward and begin to deal with any scenario.
Absolutely.
Because we actually had a clear, concise intention of, I'm going to work through this.
Absolutely.
Whereas, that's the heads to the other side of the coin, which would be, I'm not feeling good, go to the gas station, get a candy bar, eat it down, made me feel good for a minute. Okay, that's gone. I need to go to the grocery store and get some ice cream. Oh my God, it's all gone. Jeez, I'm still hungry. I have chips.
Right, now I'm going to binge watch something on Netflix to forget that I'm a person, and then I'm just going to crash, and I'm going to wake up feeling like crap.
Which I feel would be the difference between intentional practice of making ourselves feel better and spiraling out in not the most positive sense, allowing more so our emotions, our feelings. They're not even, are they even emotions at that point if we're not aware of why we're feeling that way? It's just kind of allowing the subconscious to take control and to man the ship, put it on autopilot while we're too busy worrying, or, in a sense, probably being more fearful about the situation than we are loving towards ourselves or what's actually going on.
And you mentioned cannabis earlier, and I just wanted to acknowledge that as well, because I don't want the takeaway of this discussion to be anything close to shame. Like I said, it could be a candy bar, it could be anything, but particularly cannabis. That was something that I used as a coping mechanism throughout college, and I was at the lowest depression that I've ever experienced in my life during those years.
When you were just constantly intaking, imbibing in it.
Well, it wasn't rooted in that.
It wasn't
rooted in cannabis. It was just life circumstances. I moved to a new city. I didn't really have any friends or people that I knew up there except for one cousin. And, I made friends up there, of course. But, in the first couple semesters or whatever, it was just like, oh, wow, this is super new. All my friends are...
lonely.
Yeah, the loneliness was setting in, I was in a long distance relationship at the time. So there was a lot of just emotional stress, and then go to class and stuff, and then go home and beat myself up for not being a social butterfly and going out of my way to talk to people and stuff. So I would just light up the one hitter, take one puff, and be like, oh wow, all of that doesn't matter at all.
Literally, Mama Ganja is right there to clear your mind. And I'm glad that you're coming more from a perspective of it wasn't rooted in that.
Right, it wasn't rooted in that, but at the same time, it was not a healthy coping mechanism, because I might have felt better for that first 5 minutes. It was like, oh my God, it doesn't matter. Just be present. But then I would end up getting the munchies and distracting myself from those true emotions, and that became a whole cycle.
You're fueling the subconscious, trying to fill almost that void of attention where it's being called.
And lack of just self-love, just that ability to just be with myself, do the things I want to do, vibe with the people that vibe with me, you know what I mean? And just being in that positive mindset. No, I was getting down on myself for not being better, which is the total opposite of self-love. Self-love is recognizing where you are now is exactly where you need to be. We can keep on going up the hill, or we can roll down it and die in a ditch. It's up to you.
And I mean, if you do either with a smile, I mean, I hope you're having fun, but not really. Please don't roll down the hill.
Right. But if you got to roll down the hill to get to rock bottom, to realize that you can pick yourself up and vibe with the people that are going to help you be uplifted.
Exactly.
That's a valuable experience too.
If we're close to you, or you got friends close to you, like, don't be afraid to ask for a hand here or there, dealing with emotions, dealing with your feelings, not to put them on others or to make anyone else deal with it. But you know what? That's a big chunk of like what friends are for and why we choose to be in each other's lives. At least I choose to be in Sean's life and he chooses to be in mine. We're not doing this because we have to,
Right.
We're really here for each other to hold this space and to center and to truly work through our own feelings, emotions, and come closer to ourselves in the process.
Absolutely. And just to be active participants in the healing that's happening on this planet right now, and goodness knows it's necessary at this point in time. So now that we've kind of set up the connection of emotion and behavioral patterns, I just want to remark and highlight that pretty much what we were talking about there when you were mentioning, now recognizing more healthy responses to our emotions, what that is emotional awareness. Mm-hmm. Some people call this emotional intelligence, and I don't really want to use that phrase too much because to me it has too much of a connotation and it makes it a mental thing. I think emotion is a more broad scale, awareness is a more broad scale.
Yeah, we're not trying to give you an EQ rating,
Right.
And make you feel like, oh, you're so very emotionally intelligent, or you're not very emotionally intelligent at all. It's less of that. It's a lot more simple, a lot more simplified, I would say.
Exactly.
Not that it's an easy process to become aware of all these emotions, but it's not because one person's smarter than the other or not. It's really just a practice that with a little bit of dedication and effort, we can become more aware of the fluidity of what we're experiencing.
Absolutely. And it starts with this conversation. It starts with whatever life experiences you've had that have led you to this moment of participating in this conversation. This is step one, is just recognizing that all of this is a thing.
Truly.
That it's a pattern within the human psyche, is to have emotions, to be sort of run by the subconscious until we bring that subconscious into the conscious. So that's what emotional awareness is bridging that subconscious and turning it into something that we are aware of within our thoughts, within our ego, so that we can become more, I don't want to say in control, but to become more fluid.
More allowing, more open, receptive, and I think, as redundant as it sounds, control comes with the letting go of.
Yeah.
And just really allowing it to be, in which case we're not physically taking all the actions, manipulating, making things happen, but it's really all occurring based on that inner state of ourselves.
And allowing emotions to arise and dissolve without
so that we can
trying
be cleaner
to...
and clearer and more open to receiving what it is that we're focused on.
Whereas that control connotation would be like, okay, the anger is arising in me. Now I'm going to try to stuff it down and repress it and get,
it's the people
I'm
around
above
me,
this.
so I got to tell them how it is.
Exactly.
And then I won't feel this way because I implemented my control.
Exactly.
And that's something I've totally worked through a lot over time, but it's still something that arises. That's why I use it as an example, because it's kind of prominent in my life.
Yeah,
and
I feel it.
I do want to say that, like, doing this episode right now is come at such a key time in my life. I've been dealing with a slight wave of a depression and whatnot, which I would consider an emotion, holding on to things that probably really don't serve so much and allowing them to come to the surface right now. And what you were saying about subconsciously we're opening up, allowing, and not letting it fuel us or ride us, but kind of bringing it up to the awareness. It's just magical, in my opinion, how now is when we're sitting and doing this clearly, and it's really beautiful. I'm grateful to have this opportunity because couldn't do it alone, man, for sure.
Absolutely.
It's a strange one. Depression, anxiety, all of it, like all these different emotions that we have to the different energies and feelings that are constantly going through.
I mean, I'm glad you brought up depression and anxiety, you know, something that is almost trending as being defined as mental illness. And, you know, let's go into that a little bit because I think it's really relevant. I mean, some people use the word depression as a way of signifying intense sadness. And you said to you it was an emotion. But I think depression can also be perhaps more accurately understood as shutting our emotions down. You know, that's what depression has been in my life. It's not necessarily
lack of receptivity.
Yeah. It's more just like instead of being sensitive to other people's emotions and to my emotions, it's more just shutting them off.
That is kind of what I meant with it too. It's
which is sad.
Yeah, I mean, but also what I was getting at is that this has been this is a means towards being more receptive and letting go of those walls and barriers, because if I've learned anything about dealing with being down, depression, lack of receptivity, it's that I've realized that the least helpful thing I can do for myself is to really identify with that depression. I don't want to defend it. I don't want to say, well, this is why I feel this way, because I'm depressed. You know what I mean?
Because I have depression.
Because that's really, that might not be the same for everyone, but for me personally, as soon as I do that, I give any little bit of fighting chance or power I have within myself to allow and work through to become more receptive and to see what it is that's shutting me off, or what feelings within myself that I've been ignoring that cause me to just shut up all receptivity and enter into a depressed state. As soon as I start to identify with that, I give up for a bit. And
I absolutely agree. Yeah.
So with emotional awareness, it's being aware enough of ourselves that, man, I'm feeling really down. I'm not open to the joys of life. I'm not open to the beautiful flow within myself, or even seeing the pretty flowers and trees that are all around me outside this awesome summer. It's the freaking opposite.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to identify with that anymore. I'm going to use my emotional awareness to take these feelings of lack of feeling almost and allow myself to feel, because I can't hide this heavy feeling inside of me. It's literally just going to shut me down more and more.
And not just that, man, but it's also to just to be honest with yourself, you know. I mean, if we wake up at 6 a.m. and we work until 10 p.m., you know, that's a lot of stimulus. That's a lot of work. You know, you're probably going to be saturated. You need some rest. You know, I think that the reason why I said that was it's a metaphor for our emotional awareness. You know, if we're constantly taking in all this stimuli, other people's emotions, the emotion of the constantly. World. Yeah, exactly. If we're on Facebook, we're seeing all these different stories of people, you know, good things, bad things, but it's stimulus. You know, it's all this stuff coming into the brain. You know, sometimes we just need to take a break and rest. And that's something that we talked about in a couple episodes ago, where depression could be really redefined as a need for deep rest. You know, so it's not something that we necessarily need to, you know, sew this patch to our jacket of our identity. I have depression, you know, because that's very limiting. And it's something that's hard to talk about, because my paradigm around mental illness, around mental health and emotional health, are very different from what I see in the mainstream understanding. So I often just shy away from having these conversations with people, because we get very emotionally identified.
And people do,
with their own sense of illness, which is understandable to a degree, but at the same time, like you're saying, if we're clinging to that identity, it doesn't leave much room for healing. And I will not believe that healing is not possible. I will not believe that people have broken brains and that they can't find a more harmonious way to live and to interact with their environments.
And that's not downplaying anyone's emotions or feelings or anything in that sense at all either. It's
recognizing.
It's a recognition. I fully agree with you. Because if I were to choose to just identify with my down feelings, I don't think I'd be here and be so open to leveling up internally, per se.
Right. And I mean, we're definitely going into more depth than we intended to with this episode, but I think it's really prevalent, and I kind of want to keep flowing with it. On the subject of mental health, and I do hesitate to go too deep into that because, like I said, I know that it's a stigma and that it's something that my paradigm isn't exactly in total alignment with the mainstream paradigm. And it's something that have just struggled to really put into words. So you know what? Why not try to do so now? So just to attempt to do so, I do have a fairly decent metaphor that I like to use. I used one of them earlier when I was talking about the dashboard of a car having a check engine light. So just to really break down that metaphor, say that depression is the check engine light of your car. I feel that the current paradigm is too focused on that symbol. I feel that we're trying to figure out how to turn off the light, turn off that warning sign.
Everyone just wants everything to look okay.
Yeah.
To be okay. And not even to be okay, but just like, as long as everyone thinks I've got my shit together, then I must have my shit together, right?
And if I don't feel like I do, I want an easy fix to just feel that without having to really dive deep into my own psyche and figure out what is not in alignment in my being. And that's different for everyone, but it's also a widespread scenario right now. So I think that it would be unwise not to acknowledge it, to approach it, and to do something about it. Like I mentioned earlier, I've experienced depression throughout my whole childhood, adolescence, and most of my adult life. And until the past 2 years or so, until I really devoted to my purpose of doing what I do, which is channel music and help other people record their music channelings.
Using those feelings, that emotion and that energy to relate, and then not just relate and keep it down and mellow, but you spiral straight up with it. You take all those ashes and like the phoenix just rise. And that's a huge part to working through these emotions and feelings. Just a little extra point here is creative expression, expressing ourselves in general.
Absolutely.
And being honest with it. And, you're saying it's so common to just want to make ourselves appear that we're doing all right, or we just want to make it look like to ourselves that we're doing all right. But that's not healthy. That's not going to work. Let's break the ice right now and say that we've just got to be honest with ourselves. We got to be honest with each other, radically honest, and radically accepting of each other at the same time. You deal with depression? Damn, sucks. Me too. But we're not going to get any better if we just keep identifying with it and using it as an excuse for why we can't do something. Because for too long, that's what kept me laying in bed for the whole daytime, only getting up to eat meals and be sad and whatever, just full of my own self-pity.
Exactly. We don't have to treat it as a terminal illness, as a terminal sickness. We can view it as a temporary feedback from our environment to our inner knowing.
A guidepost.
A guidepost. Like I said before, depression, I feel like it is that we've been too overwhelmed by the emotional context of our lives, family life, personal life, and the world at large.
A lot of times it is a lack of cultivation of that emotional awareness that we were talking about. It's not having taken the time or energy to understand more so, that I like to say, what we're going through, to bring these feelings to the surface as emotions to be worked through and to keep on pushing that energy into motion, not like forcefully, but allowingly. It's like a pimple. You're going to have to do a little bit of work on it. It's not just going to come to the head immediately all the time. You might have to find it, give it a little press, and then, later on in that night, you're going to have a head and you're going to be able to pop it, deal with it. It's going to hurt a little bit. It's going to hurt. I promise. But
you're going to survive.
You're going to survive. You do it right. You take your time and you're patient with it. You're not going to scar yourself. And 24 hours later, maybe not exactly, just on the example of this pimple, that blemish is gone.
Absolutely.
Because we chose to take the time to
shine that awareness, bring some attention to it rather than just ignoring it or
trying
oh my
to go
God.
into it and ripping it out and then leaving a big old scar
Exactly.
or scab on our face.
Exactly. I have acne. I'm a broken, disgusting human being. Wah,
But no, it's a relatable example, I feel like, too. What it is like to deal with things that are underneath the surface and bringing them to a place where we can work on them.
Whereas on the other hand, the habitual response is to just shut down as a defense mechanism. It's because we don't want to have to feel all that pain. We don't want to feel the pain of the world.
There's a pimple on my forehead. I cannot go out tonight.
Right. Exactly. And, it's so relatable. I mean, we don't need to spend a lot of time remarking on all of the injustices and all of the out of whack systems that are in play in the world right now. You already know. I don't need to tell you that we are cogs in a greater machine that isn't exactly built for the well-being of mankind. You already know that. And it's heavy. But if we don't do anything to acknowledge it... Okay, so to reel it back, I was just trying to say that it's relatable, that there is a lot of heaviness, there's a lot of darkness and sadness and sorrow in the world.
To finish building that bridge you were just starting to erect, really, we don't deal with these kinds of emotions and feelings within our own self, we're going to have bigger problems in the world outside of us. We're going to see that, okay, our shutting down due to lack of energy to deal with our emotions at this point because we've allowed them to build up so much, causing us to enter into a state of habitual nothing. It seems like non-receptivity, just floating, moving, just surviving rather than internally thriving, cultivating. And that reflects into our lack of action to make the changes that we can in the world outside of us, and also to really accept what's going on within us so that we can begin to float and move through the world more freely without such a burden of weight on our shoulders, to be a positive light and a positive change, so that the earth, which to an extent is the greater machine that we are part of, but
it's our home.
What Sean is saying is that there is this system that we've built on earth that we're also a part of that obviously isn't for the greater good of the earth and ourselves. And that's kind of what we are shifting internally through making these choices and becoming more aware of ourselves, healing through past traumas, healing through feelings that we might not understand, but with a little bit of emotional energy and awareness, we're going to be able to bring those to the surface, have our communities come together with ourselves and others, and then make positive changes that help us to move forward and to heal ourselves and the earth in the process.
And to be clear here, these systems that you're speaking of here, they are man-made. This is something that we have built as a community, so we can unbuild it as well. It's not just a necessary evil that is an eternal situation of Earth. It's a very temporary thing, and it's gotten to the point where it's now our responsibility to evolve it into something that is actually based around the well-being of humanity and the planet at large. If we don't take care of our habitat, it's not going to continue to take care of us. And it may have been a necessary evil to conduct ourselves in the way we have for the past 500 years to 10,000 years.
Analytically, you look at it, seems like a pretty good system, right?
In the sense that, it's what we've done. It's how we've gotten to this moment that we're in right now, and I do not regret that, because this is a beautiful moment, and it's perfect. From that grand scheme of everything, this is a perfect moment. So I'm not here to whine and gripe about why things are the way they are, how they got, oh my God, we're all victims. No. I'm just here to acknowledge that it's time to move on. It's time to create something that is more harmonious with our inner self, with our inner truth, and with our larger communities and the planet at large.
Given that we can all take a moment to be in this moment here and actually have the energy and awareness of our own perfect, seamless, per se, observational selves, minus the feelings, the emotions, and just allowing them, not minus them, not taking them out of the picture, but accepting them for what they are, allowing them to move through, to be worked through. And it seems a lot more naturally than having to put a whole bunch of effort into making ourselves better. It just seems that all the things that are in true alignment with the self and the whole, the all that is, and the betterment for us, the betterment for the earth included in that whole, it just comes into alignment naturally. The more we're able to bring it all to the surface, let it go, and tune into ourselves wholly, it's right there. We're going to naturally shift out of the systems that don't serve us anymore. The more people that become aware of themselves, take the time to shed those heavy layers through their own emotional awareness of working through these feelings, the more of a collective powerhouse of people that we're going to have within the center of what is, melting into it all, becoming it all, realizing that we are it all.
And we always have been.
And we always have been. And that's why, we created this system. Maybe not us personally in these physical vessels, Sean, Clayton, you, he, she, me, or they. We're going to create a better one. We're currently creating better ones all of the time. And at the same time, we're burning down the old systems. Let it burn. But, it doesn't have to be violent. It doesn't have to be I've visioned so many times being out in the streets and shouting how it should be and which way to go.
But the energy of it, burn those impurities within us that prioritize greed over
family,
love,
over connectedness,
over
over love. Right, it's really
profit over people. We could go on and on.
Truly, not even to oversimplify it, but you see a lot of these greed comes out of the fear of not having enough.
Exactly. But just to reel it back, I wanted to say that that alignment, that centeredness, that inner knowing, that truth, it's always there. We've danced our way into this shadow of that truth. And all we have to do is realign that within ourselves and then start to rise up into that realm of other people doing the same, which is something that, in the current scientific paradigm, I know I can't convince anyone of that, but try it out. Try it out. Do something different in your life for 1 month and see if you see a reflection in the outer world.
Truly, and even scientifically now, quantum physics is proving more and more of what mystics, so to say, have been saying and attempting to share with the world for millennia, since
what they've been experiencing.
What has been experienced from within, this interconnectedness to the relation of what is without, what is essentially technically outside of ourselves. SpongeBob meme, outside of ourselves. There is no outside of ourselves.
Absolutely.
We are experiencing the full connectedness of our own thought stream and pattern of emotional intelligence, awareness, and energy all at once. And back to what my own definition of emotion is. It's that guiding post, that sign, that awareness and analyzation of our own internal energy and intuition so that we can move closer into that center of self or stay within it. So we're all feeling good, vibing, riding high on our cloud, floating around. Something's going on. Oh, really intense up there. This guy's arguing with this guy. Something in our hearts is like, just float on by that. Okay, stay in ourselves. They'll work it out. They'll figure it out. And we know and everything's okay. Or, you don't listen to that. You interject and empathize, and they're rubbing all that on us. So it's not always like, I'm feeling bad, I need to follow the signs to feel better. A lot of times it's just trust the signs. Trust yourself. Feel it out. And trust that everyone's going to feel it out and allow it in their own way.
And muster up the courage to step up to that inner knowing and to that trust of your of your intuition. It could be the complete opposite of your scenario as well. You could be walking past someone in a conflict and say, oh no, I don't want to get involved, that sounds way uncomfortable. But maybe an inner knowing says, no, I have something that I can share with these people, or I could break up this fight, or whatever it may be. I can help. Yeah,
truly.
I can show up and be a loving presence for them to then see that and reflect it. And that's exactly what I'm getting at with this inner-outer dialect.
And it could really go either way. Both scenarios equally as plausible, coming down to trusting our hearts, trusting our center, and how we're feeling in that moment. Do we feel like we can help? Is there actually something we can do? Is this making me feel better to move forward and share my own grace of being with them?
And not out of obligation.
No, because it feels right. Not because we feel like we need to go save the world or save these people. No,
or prove our worth for our own salvation.
No, not whatsoever.
Just stepping into that salvation.
We all have to save ourselves. If we're breaking it down to that, we got to do this work for ourselves. No one else can do it. But if it makes us feel better, makes us come closer into that center, do it. If it doesn't, be strong. Sometimes we got to let it unfold around us. And, with a true center of self and a true peace and emotional awareness to what we're feeling, we can let the world unfold around us and realize that we are receiving everything that we've ever dreamed of or desired. Or we could go against that, and it's going to be a upstream swim. It's going to be a lot more difficult instead of, just floating and allowing it to take us where we need to go.
Absolutely. I'm trusting that flow. And just to reel it in here a little bit, I just kind of want to set that scene a little bit further. So, as you mentioned, these systems in place have kind of built up out of a need to answer the animal problem of surviving. And in our quote-unquote first world countries, we've essentially done that. We've essentially solved the problem of survival in the sense of shelter and food are in abundance. That doesn't mean that every person has access to them or the opportunity.
There comes in the systems of, this is greed, throwing away all of the leftover foods instead of donating it to a food
just
shelter.
The housing crisis or the unemployment crisis. These are the underbellies, the shadow of our systems that we like to just kind of ignore. I've got a job, I've got a place to live, I like to complain about the price of rent and everything, but I can afford it, But what about the people that can't say that? I mean, we just like to ignore all that.
It's almost a given when it comes to the work or play that we do with ourselves internally to become aware of the issues outside of that. It just is almost natural that once we tune into a certain space within ourselves, for me, I consider it the heart space, we become more aware of what others are going through and a lot of the problems that we might have shunned ourselves to before working through things and when we were in an equally as shut off space. But the more we are able to open up and be more emotionally fluid, we're able to see, hey, not everyone's getting treated right. So that, going back to what we were saying a little bit ago, that is another way that we in turn are going to be able to help the world as we become more whole within ourselves, realizing that interconnectedness.
Absolutely. And trusting that is going to sustain no matter what. That doesn't mean that we're not going to play our part, but trusting that we need to play our part in order for truth to carry on, in order for that equilibrium to be sustained in our own lives. It's still going to be there. That doesn't mean that we're going to be the ones to witness it. If we sit back, lazy, depressed, anxious about everything that could ever happen, and paralyzed by those states of fear, no, we might end up seeing a pretty disastrous future. But that's not the one I'm going to walk myself into. That's not the one that we're building here as a community and as individuals, first and foremost. And so my whole point in bringing up survival, and I know we didn't talk about it too much, but we've already gone on a little bit long in this episode, so hopefully that wasn't too brief of a breezing through the whole 10,000s of years of human evolution that has been considered physical survival. But my point now is that if we don't learn how to emotionally survive, if we don't learn how to become emotionally aware in ourselves and in our communities, we're not going to be able to survive on this planet for much longer.
Truly.
That doesn't mean the Earth is going to die, but it's going to sweat us out if we continue to be a sickness to the planet.
Global warming, or is the Earth getting a fever trying to kill off the poison of humanity, just like our body heats up to destroy any
Parasites.
Microbial or parasitic, exactly, effectors to ourselves.
Parasites
Infectors.
The energy of the parasite is one that is only leeching. It's not a symbiotic relationship of give and take. It's only take. Are we giving back to the Earth right now? We are. But are we? Are we planting more biodiversity, or are we just reaping fossil fuels and blah 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 blah?
It brings a song to my head, a Rising Appalachia song, Scale Down. Everyone should check it out. The whole album's beautiful, but one of the lines in that is we are biting the metaphorical hand that feeds, and we're trashing our own birthday cake. Like, we can't do that. It's not sustainable. We stand up, look around, and scale that down too. And I don't think I could say it better in my own words, so you should all definitely check that song out. It's very inspiring and beautiful, and has a lot to relate to kind of what we're saying here in this moment, at least, of we got to really tune it into ourselves, become aware of our interconnectedness and awareness of self through our own emotional holds, and then allow it to just be. And
well, I'm not sure if I resonate with scale it down. Like, what does that mean? Like, does that mean that we need to kind of reverse our evolution and get back to the old way of things?
I wouldn't say
we
reverse.
We can't scale down the human population.
And I wouldn't say that it's going back to an old way of things. I'd just say a more natural flow.
Yeah.
Entering into a more natural flow. I feel that emotion's a more primal sense of self, or feeling per se would be a more primal sense within ourselves, relating closer to our own cores, whereas mental analytics is a more new level of conscious evolution, and which can bring us, it's actually more separated from the center of self, I feel like, until we consciously tune ourselves into that with our own mental awareness. And what the song is getting at with scaling down is pointing more towards the surplus that people are living in, constantly fueling themselves, all of these distractions and all this stuff that's keeping us from being fully aware. You know, it's more so that depression fuel, keeping us down, and in just the physical aspect of fueling ourselves, just surviving, not necessarily
hoarding resources.
Yes, exactly.
Out of fear of that day of scarcity, which we're all living as if it's right now.
Being greedy and taking more than we truly need. What it's saying is to scale it down in the sense of just using what we need, being
that makes sense to me,
with the wholeness of ourselves.
Yeah, I just wanted to expand upon it in the sense that, you know, you're talking about the difference between the mental and the emotional, and I just want to underline the importance of marrying these two aspects of self, you know, these two wings, if you will.
Truly.
You know, we need both to fly right now. We can't go backwards. We can't make less people exist on the earth. You know, we're pushing 8 billion right now.
And where do the mind and the heart connect?
Exactly. And in that connection, we're going to create and continue to evolve and have even greater technologies, but they're going to be harmonious, not technologies that are used to divide and conquer, technologies that, you know,
unify
reinforce,
and gather and
exactly. Whereas opposed to right now, we're in the midst of technologies that reinforce division between people, you know, reinforcing this personal identity. I'm thinking of like Facebook and social medias, where the algorithms are designed so that we essentially only see things that we've shown that we will engage with, that we like. So we're basically just seeing our own opinions being reflected at us. We're not getting that true global perspective of how things can be in true harmony by dancing with that friction. You know, we can't just agree all the time. You know, even in our conversations, we don't always agree 100%, you know, but we got to like talk it out and have that friction build something greater.
Which is a lot of what happens before we do get on and cast. We come to, and it's through those conversations where not necessarily butting heads, but we are rubbing on each other, causing that friction, wearing down what isn't to belong. All that dirt and dust and decay covering the truth of our own perspectives is just rubbing off from us, bouncing back and forth, allowing us to come to, a lot of times, an entirely new truth that we share.
Right, or just a refined truth that was the nugget, that was the gold within each of our perspectives, but we have to scale that down and, refine that to the more pure truth in it. And I mean, I feel like that's what we literally just did when I asked about what scaling was, because I could have just said, yeah, right on, brother, and then we wouldn't have had that whole conversation because I didn't truly resonate with it. I wouldn't have refined it
more, and I'm sure that helped for anyone else involved too.
Exactly. So I think we've pretty well painted the picture of what we intended on getting at with this episode, starting with our own takes on what emotion even is, and bridging that into how it relates to mental and emotional health, emotional awareness, and why it's pertinent now more than ever for us to take that leap into emotional evolution as we've been physically evolving and dealing with survival for most all of human history. Now it's time to go to the next level and thrive emotionally. So as some of you know, in Breakthrough Consciousness, we like to end each episode with a action takeaway. And for this episode, that is going to actually be the next episode. So in the next episode, we're going to outline a method that we've devised and sort of refined between the two of us over the last few months. And as I said at the beginning of this episode, it's just simply a tool. I don't expect people to hear this and be like, oh, well, I'm gonna, that's what I do now to work through my emotions. And even Clayton and myself, it's not like we've 100% devoted ourselves to this method in the sense that we're using it every single day. But, it's hard to implement behavioral shifts. It's always going to be a process to rewire our patterns, to restructure our behavior. So, as I have used this and as I will continue to practice using this method, it's been really helpful for me just to have some kind of framework to catch myself when I've been emotionally triggered, for lack of a better word, and just a reflective tool. So I won't go on and on about it too much here. I will save the details for the next episode. So if you've enjoyed this conversation, definitely be on the lookout for that. It should be released here within the next few days. And you can find the rest of the series on the Resounding Source Guided Meditations channel, which is just Resounding Source on YouTube. And you can find all of this on our website, resoundingsource.com. So thank you all for tuning in until we get out of the loop and into it all. Keep breathing.